Ballast Water Management Convention. A Comprehensive Overview. By Vishwastava. What is the Ballast Water Management Convention, BWMC? Introduction. The Ballast Water Management Convention, BWMC, is a global maritime treaty adopted by the International Maritime Organization, IMO, to address the ecological and economic threats posed by the transfer of aquatic organisms and pathogens in ships' ballast water. Definition. Ballast water is taken on board ships to maintain stability, especially when cargo is unloaded. When discharged into a different marine environment, ballast water can release invasive species, disrupting local ecosystems and economies. Objective. Primary goal: to prevent the spread of harmful aquatic organisms and pathogens through ballast water discharge. This is achieved by mandating ships to either exchange ballast water mid-ocean or treat it to meet specific environmental standards. Why was it needed? Ecological threats. Introduction of invasive species can harm native marine life, disrupt ecosystems, and threaten biodiversity. Example: zebra mussels in the Great Lakes cause significant ecological and economic damage. Economic costs. Invasive species can impact fisheries, infrastructure, and local economies. Human health risks. Ballast water can carry waterborne diseases like cholera to new regions. Global impact. The BWMC establishes uniform regulations for all member states, promoting sustainable maritime practices and protecting marine environments worldwide. Adoption milestone. The BWMC was adopted on the 13th of February 2004 after extensive consultations with IMO member states, scientists, and environmental organizations. History and key dates of the BWMC adoption. Of the BWMC date of adoption, the 13th of February 2004, adopted during the International Maritime Organization, IMO, diplomatic conference. A response to the growing concern over the global transfer of harmful aquatic species through ships' ballast water. Ratification milestone. The BWMC required ratification by 30 countries representing 35% of global merchant shipping tonnage to enter into force. Achieved, the 8th of September 2016 by the state, 52 countries representing 35.14% of the world's tonnage ratified the convention. Entry into force. The convention officially came into effect on the 8th of September 2017, 1 year after reaching the ratification threshold. Ships were required to start meeting the D1 ballast water exchange standard from the state. Amendments to the BWMC 2018. IMO introduced amendments to clarify compliance and inspection processes. 2019. Additional amendments addressed the implementation schedule for ballast water treatment systems, D2 standard. Transition period for D1 to D2 extended for older vessels to ease compliance. 2020. IMO revised guidelines for testing ballast water management systems, BWMS. Enhanced focus on performance and sustainability of treatment technologies. Significance of the convention's timeline. Decades in the making. First proposed in the late 20th century as ballast water issues became more prominent. Represents a global consensus to combat marine pollution and ecological disruption caused by invasive species. Scope of the Ballast Water Management Convention, BWMC. Applicability of the BWMC. The BWMC applies to vessels engaged in international voyages to regulate ballast water discharge and prevent the transfer of invasive species. Who does it apply to? Commercial vessels. Ships designed to carry and discharge ballast water, including cargo ships, oil tankers, container ships, bulk carriers. Includes new and existing vessels. Global coverage. The BWMC sets international standards for all ratifying member states, ensuring uniform compliance. Who is exempt? Ships operating exclusively in the waters of one country, domestic voyages. Warships, naval auxiliaries, and state-owned vessels used for non-commercial purposes. Vessels with permanently sealed ballast water tanks, not subject to discharge. Ships that discharge ballast water to a reception facility meeting IMO standards. Goals of the BWMC: protect marine environments by minimizing ecological harm, preventing the spread of invasive species, promoting sustainability, ensuring that maritime activities do not disrupt ecosystems, standardizing compliance, establishing clear rules for ballast water management globally. Legal and geographical scope: jurisdiction applies to ships operating between countries that are signatories to the BWMC. Enforced by Port State Control (PSC) in member states. Inspection and compliance: ships can be inspected, and penalties may be imposed for non-compliance. Key regulations of the Ballast Water Management Convention. Overview of BWMC standards. The BWMC establishes two key standards for ballast water management to ensure compliance and environmental protection. D1 standard, ballast water exchange definition, requires vessels to exchange ballast water in the open ocean, at least 200 nautical miles from shore and in waters 200 meters deep. Purpose: replace coastal or port water with mid-ocean water, reducing the risk of introducing invasive species to coastal ecosystems. Requirements: exchange at least 95% of ballast water by volume. If exchange is not feasible due to safety or stability concerns, alternative arrangements must be approved by the port state. D2 standard, ballast water treatment definition, requires ships to treat ballast water to meet specific environmental standards before discharging. Performance criteria: maximum concentration limits for viable organisms, 50 micrometers, less than 10 organisms per cubic meter. Organisms less than 50 micrometers and 10 micrometers, less than 10 viable organisms per milliliter. Harmful bacteria: strict limits on cholera, E. coli, and intestinal enterococci. Implementation timeline: new vessels must comply upon delivery. Existing vessels must retrofit systems within specified timelines, as per IMO amendments. Compliance and documentation: ballast water management plan, BWMP. Ships must have an IMO-approved plan detailing procedures for ballast water exchange or treatment. Ballast water record book, record all ballast water operations, including intake, exchange, treatment, and discharge. International Ballast Water Management Certificate, issued by flag states, demonstrating compliance with BWMC standards. Port State Control, PSC, inspections. Scope of inspections: verify valid BWMP and ballast water record book. Sampling of ballast water discharge to ensure compliance with D2 standards. Penalties for non-compliance: fines, detention, or denial of port entry for ships violating regulations. IMO requirements for ballast water management. Overview of IMO's role. The International Maritime Organization, IMO, establishes and oversees regulations under the BWMC to ensure global compliance and uniform standards for ballast water management. Key IMO requirements. Approved Ballast Water Management Plan, BWMP. Ships must have a plan approved by the flag state that details procedures for ballast water exchange or treatment. Safety measures for crew and environment during ballast operations. Emergency procedures in case of equipment failure. The BWMP must be accessible on board for inspections. International Ballast Water Management Certificate, IBMC. Issued by the flag state after verifying the vessel complies with the BWMC requirements. Valid for 5 years and subject to intermediate inspections. Ballast Water Record Book, BWRB, must document every ballast water operation, including ballast water intake and discharge, ballast water exchange or treatment, emergency procedures and deviations, if any. Treatment technology approval: ships must install and use an IMO-approved ballast water treatment system, BWTS, to meet the D2 standard. The system must pass rigorous testing for efficacy, reliability, and environmental safety. Inspection and enforcement. Port State Control (PSC). Port authorities can inspect ships to ensure compliance. Sampling of ballast water discharge may be conducted to verify adherence to D2 standards. Penalties for non-compliance. Ships found in violation may face fines or detention. Denial of port entry. Implementation timeline. New ships comply with D2 standards upon delivery. Existing ships comply as per retrofit schedules. Transition from D1 to D2. Detailed explanation of D1 standard, ballast water exchange. What is the D1 standard? The D1 standard of the Ballast Water Management Convention, BWMC, requires ships to conduct a ballast water exchange during their voyages. This process aims to replace coastal or port water, which may contain harmful organisms, with open ocean water, reducing the likelihood of transferring invasive species to new environments. Ballast water exchange process. Ballast water exchange requirements. Location. The exchange must occur at least 200 nautical miles from the nearest land, mid-ocean, in waters that are 200 meters deep or more. Volume. Ships must exchange at least 95% of ballast water by volume. The remaining 5% can be treated as it is often contaminated with debris, sediments, and organisms. Techniques for ballast water exchange. Flow-through exchange. Water is pumped out from the ballast tanks, and new water is simultaneously taken in. Typically used when the vessel is in open waters, ensuring that the ballast tanks are fully flushed. Sequential exchange. Ballast tanks are emptied in sequence, and then filled with open ocean water, replacing most of the coastal ballast water. Mixed water exchange. A hybrid technique, using a combination of flow-through and sequential exchange methods. Ballast water exchange areas. Exchanges must occur only in designated open ocean zones, where the risk of introducing invasive species is minimized. Prohibited in territorial waters, within 12 nautical miles of shore, due to the higher concentration of local marine organisms. Who can use the D1 standard? Vessels eligible for D1 compliance. Existing ships. Vessels built before the entry into force of the BWMC, the 8th of September 2017, can continue to use the D1 standard until they are required to install a treatment system or meet D2 standards based on their retrofit schedules. Ships operating in specific conditions. Some vessels that operate exclusively in one country's waters, domestic voyages, or those that have sealed ballast tanks may be exempted from the D2 treatment system but are still required to exchange ballast water according to the D1 standards. Restrictions on use of D1. Ships on domestic routes. Ships operating only in national waters that are not involved in international trade may be exempt from the D1 requirement, but international vessels must follow the D1 exchange process. Limited by safety. If the ballast water exchange process would compromise the safety or stability of the vessel, alternative arrangements, for example, using an approved ballast water treatment system, may be allowed with port state approval. Advantages and challenges of the D1 standard. Advantages. Effective in reducing invasive species. The exchange process helps to significantly reduce the risk of transporting harmful aquatic organisms to new locations. Cost-effective. Less expensive than the installation of a ballast water treatment system, BWTS, especially for existing ships. Challenges. Operational difficulties. Some ships, particularly those with limited ballast tank capacity, may find it difficult to achieve the required 95% exchange rate. Weather and sea conditions. Ballast water exchange can be hazardous under adverse weather conditions or if a ship is unable to reach the appropriate depth and distance from shore. Geographical limitations. The requirement for 200 nautical miles of open ocean water may not always be feasible in regions with narrow shipping routes. Detailed explanation of D2 standard, ballast water treatment. What is the D2 standard? The D2 standard of the Ballast Water Management Convention, BWMC, sets the requirements for treating ballast water before it is discharged into a new marine environment. The goal is to reduce the concentration of harmful organisms and pathogens to levels that do not pose a risk to marine ecosystems, human health, or local economies. D2 Treatment Requirements Performance Criteria. The D2 standard specifies the maximum permissible concentrations for various organisms and pathogens in the discharged ballast water. Organisms 50 micrometers, including zooplankton, maximum concentration 10 organisms per cubic meter. Organisms less than 50 micrometers and 10 micrometers, including phytoplankton, maximum concentration 10 viable organisms per milliliter. Harmful bacteria, E. coli, maximum of 250 CFU/100 milliliters. Intestinal enterococci, maximum of 100 CFU/100 milliliters. Vibrio cholera, maximum of 1 CFU/100 milliliters. Ballast water treatment systems, BWTS. Ships must install and use IMO-approved ballast water treatment systems to meet D2 standards. Treatment technologies include filtration, removes larger organisms and particles. Ultraviolet, UV, radiation, kills microorganisms with ultraviolet light. Chemical disinfection, uses chemicals to neutralize harmful organisms. Electrochlorination, uses electricity to generate chlorine-based disinfectants. Ozonation, uses ozone gas to disinfect ballast water. Compliance deadlines for D2. New ships comply with D2 immediately upon delivery from the shipyard. Must have an IMO-approved ballast water management plan, BWMP, and ballast water treatment system, BWTS, in place from the beginning. Existing ships must install a BWTS to comply with D2 standards during the first scheduled dry docking after the 8th of September 2017 or by the following deadlines. By 2022, ships built before the entry into force of the Convention. By 2024 or 2027, vessels over 400 gross tons or those subject to extensions. Installation and operational considerations. Retrofit challenges for existing ships. Retrofitting ships with a BWTS can be expensive and technically challenging. Ships must undergo modifications to accommodate the treatment system, which may include installing new pumps, power systems, and storage tanks. Maintenance and monitoring. Regular maintenance of the BWTS is crucial for ensuring the system's ongoing effectiveness. Operational staff must be trained to monitor and operate the BWTS, ensuring it functions within the prescribed limits for treatment efficiency. Advantages of the D2 standard. Effective for reducing harmful organisms. The treatment system ensures that harmful pathogens and aquatic species are killed or rendered incapable of surviving in new environments. Environmental protection. Significantly reduces the risk of introducing invasive species that can cause ecological and economic damage. Global standardization. Uniform international regulations prevent the risk of non-compliance in different countries and ensure that all ships meet the same standards. Challenges of the D2 standard. Cost of technology. The initial cost of installing and maintaining an IMO-approved ballast water treatment system can be high, especially for existing ships. Technological limitations. Some treatment systems may not be effective under all conditions, such as water with high turbidity or salinity. Operational issues. Systems must be maintained and regularly inspected to prevent malfunctions or inefficiencies. Challenges and emergency procedures in ballast water management. Emergency contingency measures. Exemptions and extensions. Ships that cannot comply with ballast water exchange or treatment due to technical difficulties may be granted temporary exemptions or extensions. These must be approved by the flag state and port state, and the ship must provide a contingency plan for ballast water management until compliance is restored. Port State Control, PSC, inspections. If a vessel is found to have an inoperative BWTS or is in violation of the D2 standard during a PSC inspection, immediate corrective actions will be required. The ship may be detained or fined, and further corrective measures may be required, including installation of a new BWTS or additional ballast water treatment equipment. Challenges in ballast water management. Operational difficulties. Space constraints. Some vessels may face space limitations when installing ballast water treatment systems, BWTS, especially older ships with less available room for additional equipment. Efficiency variability. Ballast water treatment systems may show varying effectiveness under different operational conditions, for example, temperature, salinity, and turbidity levels. Financial and technological barriers. High costs. The installation and ongoing maintenance of BWTS can be costly for shipping companies, particularly for older vessels that require retrofitting. Technological reliability. Some treatment systems may not meet the required discharge standards in extreme conditions, causing compliance issues. Environmental and geographical limitations. Ballast water exchange restrictions. Ships are required to conduct ballast water exchanges only in mid-ocean, at least 200 nautical miles from shore. In regions with congested shipping routes or short-distance international trade, this requirement may not always be practical. Extreme weather conditions. Adverse weather or sea conditions may make it difficult or unsafe to perform ballast water exchange, impacting compliance. Compliance monitoring and enforcement issues. Inconsistent enforcement. Enforcement of ballast water management regulations may vary by port state, leading to inconsistent compliance across regions. Inspection and sampling challenges. Sampling ballast water to verify compliance can be difficult due to the complexity of monitoring and testing, especially for ships that use chemical treatment or electrochlorination methods. Emergency procedures for ballast water management. Malfunctioning ballast water treatment system, BWTS. Immediate actions. If a BWTS is not functioning correctly, the ship's crew must immediately notify the port state or relevant maritime authorities. Alternative ballast water management procedures, such as ballast water exchange, D1 standard, may be authorized. Temporary measures. Some ships may be allowed to discharge ballast water into reception facilities that are designed to handle ballast water and ensure it is treated properly before release. Failure to meet D2 standards. If the ship is unable to treat ballast water to the required D2 standards due to equipment failure or other issues, the ship should seek immediate approval from the port state for an alternative compliance plan. Emergency treatment methods, such as additional filtration or chemical dosing, may be permitted, subject to approval. Ballast water discharge in restricted areas. In cases where the ship needs to discharge ballast water in restricted waters, due to navigational challenges or unforeseen circumstances, the ship should follow special discharge protocols as specified by the IMO or relevant maritime authority. Notify the relevant authorities and provide a report explaining the emergency discharge situation. The future of the Ballast Water Management Convention. Ongoing developments. Technological advancements. Development of smarter, more efficient ballast water treatment technologies. Increased use of AI and machine learning for real-time monitoring and predictive maintenance of BWTS. Stricter regulations. The IMO is considering stricter enforcement and updates to the BWMC to ensure higher standards of environmental protection. Implementation of data collection and analysis systems to improve compliance. Global harmonization. Efforts to standardize ballast water management practices and technologies across all regions, reducing discrepancies in enforcement and ensuring global uniformity. Environmental impact monitoring. Ongoing research into the long-term effects of ballast water treatment on marine ecosystems to refine the standards further. Conclusion and key takeaways. Summary of the Ballast Water Management Convention. Purpose: the BWMC aims to prevent the spread of harmful aquatic species and pathogens through ships' ballast water, protecting marine ecosystems globally. Key standards: D1. Ballast water exchange to reduce the introduction of invasive species. D2. Treatment of ballast water to meet strict discharge standards. Key takeaways: global cooperation. The BWMC represents a global effort to standardize ballast water management across the maritime industry. Environmental protection: helps to mitigate ecological and economic damage caused by invasive species in marine environments. Ongoing compliance and innovation. Ongoing technological advancements, stricter regulations, and global harmonization will ensure the effectiveness and future of the convention. Ship owner responsibility. Compliance with BWMC standards is essential for ship owners and operators to ensure environmental sustainability and avoid penalties.